Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another Product Growth Leaders Conversations. May, as you know, I've been working with a client and I've been dealing with feature requests as this big thing, feature parity, all these things, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of requests. And I looked back and I realized we haven't talked about feature requests ever. I mean, isn't this like one of the more like key things that happens in product management? People get stuck in feature requests.
I feel like whenever people talk about product management, they don't usually talk about the things that we actually do. It's always just the bigger things that are weighing on us, like stakeholder management or dealing with engineers or we don't even talk about design. Dealing with the
True.
roadmap, dealing with prioritization. It's like the actual thing that you do, but feature requests seems to be taking a step back and it's a much larger bucket of things that you have to deal with.
And perhaps the issue is we don't want to be feature factories, but we need features to get outcomes, right? And I don't know. Maybe we'll delve in. Maybe we'll delve into this. We can figure it out. As I was noticing before we went live, we may have our youngest average age ever on a panel. I mean, just because Steve's not here, that makes that happen. But we got a great panel today, along with May. We've got Calvin Marshall, DJ Dailey, and Paul Natala joining us. All people who every time they've been on the panel bring it in. It should be an amazing conversation. So on Monday,
first time caller, Grant. So this is the first time on the panel.
Mm-hmm. No, you've been on ones like before we went this way. You've been on the big calls we've had.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in the format that we do it now, this is the first time. But I consider you a past participant because you've been on these when we did them in the old way with anybody showing up. On Monday, we put this question in the chat, in LinkedIn. What are the best ways to manage feature requests from customers and executives? We all get them. We need to deal with them. So with that, May, I'm going to start with you, right? What's the best way for us to manage these?
So I don't really think about how do you manage them because I feel like that's a little too late, right? The question is, what is a feature request? And a feature request is someone comes to you and say, I want a thing. And you say, well, that's nice. I have 20,000 other things. Why is your thing important? But that's also the wrong question to ask because they're not going to have the right answer for you. They're going to say, oh, customer A wants it. I've been hearing it from 3 different people. But that also doesn't answer the question, like, why do they want the thing, right? Because when feature requests come in, they usually say, everyone's telling me they want this. And this could be the absolutely wrong solution for something that could be much simpler or something that could look very different, right? If your customer comes to see you and say, I want AI, and you say, well, we're a company that makes hydraulics. Like, how do we do this? Like, you can't. So I think it's really important to address the concept of a feature request, but also be able to strip away that notion of this is a transactional conversation to something that's actually productive. It's like, okay, your customer wants this. Why do they want this? And how do you get that perspective from multiple groups within your and outside of your organization, right? So is there a way to turn feature requests into insights about the market that helps you determine strategy and or prioritization?
So I'll take that just a little further. The 5 whys is the way you manage feature requests, or however many whys you need to get there. Okay. I actually that's normally when I get a feature request, I do okay, if I do that, what would get better? What problem are you trying to solve? What's the value for solving that? And we can do that. but the reality is, and you also started at the right place. I thought is we shouldn't need feature requests because we should be out ahead of it, anticipating it.
A feature request is an idea, right? What is that value? What is the value of that idea by itself? I mean, you get thousands of ideas a day. You don't act on them. When you act on them, that's when value comes out, or cost. But
Yeah. Okay. I get it. I like it. Calvin, you had your hand raised. Was it to make the point I made?
Yeah. Actually, you did kind of make the point that I was making. You made the point that I was thinking. It was along the 5 whys, and also, going back to what problem are we trying to solve? If someone comes to you with a feature request, it's like, yeah, that's great, but how does it help us move us toward our end goal? And I think that becomes the important question to ask. Even if an executive comes to you, or a salesperson comes to you and says, I have an idea.
Yeah.
Or as Steve is so fond of saying, a guy told me. It's like, well,
Yeah.
what problem is it trying to solve, and then how big is it? What's the impact?
Yeah, I love it. DJ, welcome aboard. First time in this panel format.
Mm-hmm.
What are the best ways to manage feature requests from executives and customers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to use the consultant's answer. It largely depends. And so, as I was thinking about this, I think I have 4 elements that can drive sort of how you manage this process. I think one is culture. So culture will drive this process. So is it a sales-driven culture? Is it a founder-led organization where that founder is a product person and deeply invested in how product operates? Is the expectation that the team will be a feature team versus a traditional product team? So that's the first bit. I think culture will drive it. Second, the role will drive it. So are you a product owner? Are you a product manager? Do you have to do both? Are you an IC? Are you a manager? Is it a hybrid role? So largely, like how you manage that intake process will be largely dictated by the cycles that you have and how your role is defined and the expectation of that role. The third bit I was thinking about is the product will drive it. So like a consumer product and the channels of feature requests and feedback is very different from, say, a B2B to C platform team, right? And who's providing those feature requests and how those are managing the expectations. And then lastly, I think organizational resources. So for instance, at my time at Return Path, I was the full stack PM. So I did PO, PM, strategy, tactical bits. And so my feature request process was very different than my time at Vivian, where we had a fully dedicated research team that was doing continuous discovery and was a true partner in working with customer support, sales, and acting as that mouthpiece to help distill and sort of bubble up themes and provide some of that feedback. So I know it's the consultant's answer, but largely that's the world that we live in as product folks, is that it's largely dictated by the environment that we're in.
Awesome. I love that, DJ. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, same question to you.
So I think I like the way people are teasing this apart and sort of separating it out into bite-sized chunks. And like most answers, the first thing I come up with is it's a people problem, because that there is a requestor, and depending on who that requestor is, the way you manage your response to them and what they see come out of it is going to define your relationship for some period of time. It's going to determine whether or not they felt respected, whether or not they felt the process was transparent and valid. There's nothing worse than having the next 2 years being, hey, I told you we were supposed to do X, Y, Z instead of A, B, C. They'll become subversive if you don't handle the person right. And at least some level of dignity, and letting them know that it will be given the appropriate level of consideration. And that might mean priority 0. But so once they have that, you can look at the testing the business value of it, testing the business fit for it. But if they feel as though that part is open and viable, it's valid, and you go, hey, look, it was great for the scope where you had visibility, but when we looked at it broader, we didn't see enough evidence that the overall market was making this a priority. And most people will go, yeah, I get it, I don't like that, but it's going to hurt for me. But I get that for the business, we would do something different. So, like I said, for me, if you don't handle that first part of the person, the rest of it gets way more difficult if you're seen as the place where ideas go to die.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you leaned into the different meanings of the word manage, right? Because a lot of it is managing the stakeholders. And I'll take it back to something May said earlier. What I've seen is if product management is not doing a good job getting out in front through discovery, through engagement with the market, and defining market-focused personas and problems and a vision of how we're going to shape the product, you leave a void that gets filled by other people who have ideas, because they all want to succeed. They all want us to build the right stuff. And so in lieu of us being ahead of the market with product strategy and ahead of the company upstream from it, people are going to have ideas. Those ideas may come from a list of features on a competitor's website. Those ideas may come from what the old product used to have. Those ideas may come from many other things. And, I think that's one of the critical things about the best way in May, this is what you were saying earlier, the best way to deal with feature requests is to not have to have them because you're ahead of it. You're being proactive there.
I don't think it's ever possible to not have feature requests, because like humans, when we get ideas, especially ones that we kind of internally vet and it's like, yeah, this is a good idea, we'll get excited about it and we'll talk about it. And I feel like that's critical to how people work together, because it's a part of collaboration to get people excited about something that you're doing together, right?
Yep.
And it sucks to have that excitement dampened by the realities of you don't have and like a machine learning team. But I also think it's important to realize that I think we should encourage people to have ideas. I think we should encourage people to talk about and discuss ideas, and not just with product, right? Having the larger conversation, opening up that forum to say, hey, I have this idea, and getting that perspective from all sides, especially in B2B, from all sides. So what does sales think about it? What does marketing think about it? What does operations think about it? What does support think about it? Those perspectives kind of change it. So like we managed to pull this off at a company that I was working at, and it was kind of crazy, because after us asking, why do you like what is this feature request going to actually do for the customer, like why do people want it, we didn't have to ask that question anymore after a couple of months, because when someone else knew that whatever was being asked is going to displace the thing that they were getting built, they would jump in and defend the backlog. They would defend the roadmap and defend the current prioritization, and also start asking prying questions that we wouldn't know how to ask, because from an, say, like a services side, it might look completely different. Right. So it's
Yeah.
about peeling apart these ideas. And occasionally we would even have the sales exec jump in and say, no, we're not doing that. Right. Like it's fascinating to see what happens when you just open it up. But the problem with this is, like, how do you circle back? Right. So
Have any of you guys read The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack about open book management?
No.
So Jack Stack took over this remanufacturing company in Southwest Missouri, I think is where it was. And the way he turned it around was through open book management. They taught everybody in the company how to read financial statements and balance sheets and everything. And they helped everybody know that. And what they said, and it was a very sort of lean type of process where they're like, we need all of you to help us save this company. if there are things that we can do to save money, to change the way we do something, to reduce risk, whatever it may be. And they were getting people, janitors and floor work people, all the people coming with ideas of how you can save money, whatever, because they help people understand. It sort of goes back to, and boy, now that I'm thinking about it, Rich Mirnoff, when Steve and I were with him on this, talked about how you have to speak the language of the boardroom, which is finance, right? And perhaps we need the whole company to speak the language of the boardroom, because then we can ask them for their ideas and understand how it impacts the business and where it can. And so I've always wanted to do, the same thing in product. And as you're talking about, May, with sourcing ideas, right? We should have everybody involved. This should be totally transparent. Everybody should understand the process. Everybody should be able to participate in the process. Everybody should be able to submit ideas. And then, if you have a prioritization schema for triage or for helping with figuring some stuff out better than 1, 2, 3, or Moscow, right? Then you bring all these ideas in and they rise and fall based on the merit, right? Steve and I use ideas. What's the impact of the market? What's the dissatisfaction with the current solution? What's the evidence we have? And that's one of the ones where I heard from a guy, Steve's favorite, that falls short on evidence. Then we go to, that's all market facing. Then we go to company facing, and it's, what's the advantage to our company? What's the strategic fit? Understand how it fits with their strategy. And then we have the evidence or the effort, which is sort of the divided by. But you need to have a viable tool to be able to do this type of stuff, to help sift through all these ideas. Every company has more ideas than we have resources. I've asked that question for 10 plus years. How many people have more ideas and resources? And it's 100%. Every single person in every single room I've ever done it, asked that question, raises their hand. So Calvin, yes.
And it's funny because this I like the idea of getting everybody involved in that process, but that gets into something totally different. I don't want to take this too sideways, but just to kind of throw this out on the wall is the psychological safety. Because having that environment where everybody is able to really share in the thought process. I give a quick shout out to Eva Beasley on that, because she's that's mentioned this in the past. There's something else I was going to say, because you've between you and me, I've unpacked a lot. And then the being able to get that viewpoint, from sales or from other organizations, because to May's point, they're seeing it from a different point of view. The parable of the blind man and the elephant. So that becomes really valuable to bring other people into those things. But it does come back to impact and to money, because oftentimes there's a certain way that the business is doing something, to solve an existing problem. And is the new feature beneficial enough to supplant the existing way that the problem is being addressed?
Yeah, and the dissatisfaction gets to that. Yeah. We need to do, and May sort of suggested this at the beginning. I wanted to get through at least the first pass of everybody. Maybe we need to, what is a feature, right? Let's go abstract our first principles on this. What is a feature?
So, gosh, how granular do you want to be?
I've always looked at that as being backwards. Thinking a feature is something a product has. A capability is something a customer is looking for to resolve a symptom and a problem. And I've been sort of beating down terminology internally, just because feature presumes that there's already an existing thing that you can point to. Here's a feature of this. But what people are really saying is I require a capability. And then they'll, just like wife just went to a doctor's appointment. She's going to say, I have this problem. What she's really saying is, I have this symptom. Because if she knew the problem, she would just go in and ask for the
medicine
or surgery or whatever it happens to be. So usually people are just telling you, my knee hurts, or my heart's beating really fast, or they're going to tell you something, and they might take a stab at what the outcome of that needs to be. But in the same way that if I walk into my doctor's office and say, I need a whole bunch of codeine, they should lock me away. It should be the exact same thing in a product conversation. If someone comes in and says, I need a feature, that should be malpractice. Go to product jail.
So you're flipping it and saying a feature is a capability somebody needs to solve a problem.
It's a presumed capability or presumed feature to manage it, to reach a capability.
So a feature, in the term of a request, if it's something we don't have, it's that presumption. If we have a feature, that feature is something the product does.
It's a snippet of code. Yeah, a snippet of code that solves a problem, right? Like at
the core.
At its core. Mm-hmm.
So we defined a product. I mean, years ago when we did what is a product? We said a product solves a problem for a persona, right? A product solves a problem for a persona, I think it was the simplest. So a feature is a component of a product that solves a sub-problem or a problem in the workflow, or some sort of problem or issue that's part of that macro problem. Is that where you are, DJ?
Yeah, I would largely agree. Mm-hmm.
Calvin?
I would agree.
Okay.
With which
May?
I'm gonna say Paul has the best definition there. I think a lot of the time, so like, let's think about why we maintain the terminology people use, right? Like, this is really about the culture of the organization that you're in, and almost all of us come into an organization, and we also come in with our experiences and predispositions towards the language that we used to use, so we bring that with us. And like, I think every one of us has worked somewhere where we use the term feature, and there's nothing wrong with the word. It's just that
It's what's attached to the word.
It's what's attached to the word, but also how other people perceive the word, right? All the people downstream. And if you think about the word request, like, it's the same reason why I don't like the word requirements, is because these come from somewhere else, and it's assumed that you have to do it, and you have to do it in this way, right? And it takes away from that ability for the team to be creative about the solution that could be better. And you when you have an existing, if someone comes to you and says, hey, Calvin, I want you to build me this box, and you're like, okay, what are the dimensions of this box? It's already the wrong question to ask. It's, well, why do you need a box? What's it gonna hold? Why do you have a body? Like, all of those things kind of come together to really help you understand, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? It's and it I feel like every time someone comes to you with a thing that they want, it already changes kind of how you think about it. Versus if someone says, oh, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, then you can have that conversation and dive deeper into what that actually looks like in their day to day. Maybe the problem isn't X, Y, and Z, but like, so and so isn't talking to the other person.
So, and this is me just thinking out loud here, right? Feature factory, feature request. Features have been the context that we have. Features have been tied to some negative things, right? The idea of a feature factory tends to be a negative concept in the product world, right? And we all complain about feature requests, but our products need features. They need capabilities, and that type of stuff. Is it just the problem with the word, and because it implies that somebody else's idea?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think a lot of it comes back to the autonomy that's given to the team. So feature factory has the connotation of we're glorified order takers. We're just going to build what's given to us, and we have very little input in terms of what and why we're building. But I do like the idea of like reframing a feature request to more of a problem statement, and that's our key job, right? So everyone has a problem. You say, what is your problem? But it's human nature to automatically start saying like, here's how I would solve it, right? Many folks go right into solutioning. And I think that's where it's our responsibility as product folks to shape and drill into what is truly the problem and then
the value for solving it.
And then work exactly. And so this comes back to your point about like speaking the language of the boardroom. I would rather condition folks, stakeholders, to speak the language of the customer and the problem. And then that's our job to then act as a bridge between the board, the business, and those stakeholders that provide that feedback and help them to shape it in context of, all right, what's the value? What are the unit economics behind it, et cetera. So
it's interesting because what that did is brought me into one area we do see a lot of issue. Not with the feature request. I mean, it sort of is very analogous to this feature request. It's the over-solutioned requirement, right? When product managers are doing solutioning in the requirement versus just problem statements, and it seems like those are like cousins, right? The feature request is somebody else trying to solution in their head. How do we solve this? And we have to break it back to the problem. But often, as product managers, people over solution themselves. And so what a feature request from a customer or executive or sales is to a product manager is a solutioned requirement to development, maybe. I don't know. Calvin, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I lost part of what I was thinking, but I think it's that, the last part, what you said, still becomes, comes back to that 5 whys and what May said earlier about the box. It's like, maybe you don't need a box. Maybe you need a different solution that will solve the same issue. It's kind of like I don't need I need a hole. I don't need what was it? I can't remember now what the metaphor is about the hole
quarter inch. I don't need a quarter inch drill bit. I need a quarter inch hole. Oh, the awl.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, no, it goes back to Theodore Levitt's marketing myopia in the quarter inch drill bit, quarter inch hole. And I think what Paul would get to is the outcome of that is, I don't need a quarter inch hole. I'm building something. What am I doing? It's helping me build something.
Just as not too many war stories, but as someone who came in with a roadmap that had certain things on it, and it didn't quite feel right to me. So I went out and asked, like, hey, who are the primary people that are looking to have this? Oh, well, we heard from this person, this person, this person. I went back and spoke to each of them. They all said that I'm interested in this, but they could not monetize like why it was an issue. It wasn't a priority to solve it. They just wanted us to offer it, and then they would make a decision as to whether or not it was beneficial to them. And in the end, we would have spent millions of dollars to try to deliver this, and then a whole pile of hope because we didn't even know exactly what capability or we were providing or what symptom we were resolving. And in the end, it's making its way off of our roadmap now.
Well, one thing that I try to lean into is I'll go to the Pendo research, but also research from Nielsen and stuff. 80%, the market failure rate, 80% of markets fail, of products fail, right? That's Nielsen research that was quoted by products fail. Products fail was the market failure rate that they talk about in the Write It book, Alberto Savoia. But then Pendo had the 80% of features are rarely, if ever, used. from their telematics data. Now, we've even had this conversation on this call. A feature that is the button you push to close the books for the quarter is only pushed 4 times a year. So, part of our job is to understand, even if it's not used a lot, the value of it for the 1 or 2 times it is used a year. But the reality is there's a ton of features out there, right? There's a ton of features that aren't used. We've all built features probably that have never been used or have only been used by one person. And so, I feel like it's, maybe this leads into bets and experimentation, right? Once we can translate it into the problem statement, then we go test it with a broader market. Is this something more people want? I'm going to sort of shift the question a little because it really builds on some of the stuff that we've been talking about already. How do you get the most value out of feature requests? They're there. We know they come in. How do we get the most value out of them?
I personally, starting back with that sort of managing the requester, I use something a little bit different than the 5 whys, but I will start with, oh, wow, that sounds like a pretty big deal. Can you tell me more about it? Can you give me an example? Where is that in the top 3 priorities for the upcoming fiscal year for that, or whoever's experiencing that problem, to sort of start creating a framework of, on the back end, how would I tell the story of why we did this, and have them sort of fill in the Mad Libs. And if you can't, that you either need to expend the effort to go back out and find that, or to start building out that case, which is 10 times the amount of work than if they give you a logically compelling story that you can go through and be like, holy crap, why am I not doing this right now? Or you go, we're going to assign that the appropriate priority.
Yeah. I like it. Calvin, how do you get the most value out of feature requests?
I think, along with what Paul said, just being able to really dig into the value that it will potentially provide. I think there's an opportunity to at least attempt to monetize it, to estimate, what the impact is, or have that conversation to go down the line of, what's the impact, how many customers is it going to add, or how much revenue is it going to gain. But yeah, just the opportunity to at least understand what someone or other group is thinking, what the impact might be, and how much value it's going to bring to the organization.
Awesome. DJ.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to the point, Paul's opening point, and then also Grant, what you were talking about in terms of opening of the process. For me, I see the value that you can get for them. It's not necessarily like the ends. Can I get the most robust feature or the highest revenue generating feature? Ultimately, that's our goal as this job. But the way I see it is like, it is a door that is open, and we should be opportunistic in terms of like using feature requests and the requesters to build relationships with those individuals and build empathy with those individuals that are requesting it. So for me, it's a great way to say, oh, they have a problem. Let's let them understand it. Let me understand their problem. But also, I think for internal stakeholders, it's a great opportunity to build empathy for how difficult product is as a role, to bring them along and say, all right, you have an idea. This is not transactional. This is a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand the problem. Let me push back in a safe space, to Calvin's point of like, not everyone's going to have the same level of understanding of business acumen or the maturity of the product and its impact, but bring them along in that journey to say, like, here's how I approach it. And then you do that enough and you start to build that culture, Grant, what you said, where they start to have more of a business acumen, a board, that sort of board language of the boardroom or board mentality. So for me, it's an opportunity to kind of like, again, empathize, build relationships, but then conversely, help condition those individuals that are providing those feature requests to think about it as a product person and sort of frame it as such.
I love it. That's great. May.
To kind of piggyback on what DJ just said, like if they come to you with a feature request, it means they trust you to be the best person who might do something with that, right? And that trust is valuable. And even if it's the scantest of trust, it is an opportunity to grow that into something more, right? So use that as a way to have that conversation and to build a better bridge in terms of how you work together. And on top of that, I think beyond just understanding the need, it's also a great time to understand, to really shift back into, if we were to do this, what does success look like? Right? What does
Yep.
success look like for, our product metrics, but also on the customer side and how they use it? What's the experience that they'll have? And it branches deeper into that UX sphere as well as the possible go-to-market sphere. All of that kind of comes back together, and you have a chance to talk about the whole product experience, especially when it comes in the form of a feature request.
I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago who actually used AI to go through 2 years of customer support notes to identify the most frequent. I think that feature requests, especially coming in from internally, it actually creates a good listening post, right? There are other people who are hearing things, seeing things. I love your point about if they're bringing it to us, there is some implied trust in that. So we're in a unique position. So, how we handle it is going to be critical. As we all said, I think the key is, it's an extra listening post. We need to understand the business value and what we can do with it and figure out where we go from there. Next question I want to ask: how do you shift a culture that's driven by feature requests? And maybe this is the typical feature factory, but if you're in a place that's like everybody's throwing ideas, feature requests at you, we need this, we need that, we need the other thing. How do you shift a culture that's in what I'll call reactive, and it's the culture of feature requests, of people thinking that's how we get to it? How do we shift away from that?
I think it's sharing ownership. I've been in, I think the companies that I've been in that have leaned feature factory, where you have this influx of feature requests, is because it is purely transactional. It is, I have an idea, I throw over to the fence, and product, you take it and run with it. It's a lack of shared accountability and responsibility for doing the extra legwork of defining the what, the what, not the what, the why, and the problem behind it. I think when stakeholders are enabled to just say, I emailed my idea, I put it on the spreadsheet, and my hands are clean. I think then that's how you get a feature request or a feature factory type of company. This shared ownership and shared accountability slows the process down, because you're naturally going to weed out some of the ideas that are bad by going through that process, but you're also going to lower the volume, because some people may just not buy into that process, and won't do that extra level of due diligence. That's been my limited experience.
I love it. Paul.
So I'm kind of still spinning the wheels a little bit on this one, but first thoughts are, anything dealing with culture is inherently heavy lifting. So the more people that you can have shoulder to shoulder on it, the better. Someone has to be dissatisfied with that, whether it's finance saying that, hey, I feel as though I would love to see the reason why we would be able to have higher confidence in good margins by doing something different, or someone in a project team that says, I don't necessarily see a connection between what I'm doing and value in the end product. There has to be someone else that's dissatisfied that can stand next to you. So when you say, like your ideas, method of sort of evaluating the scope and the fit of a particular idea, someone else has to be able to say, and that is important to me as well. And so dang it, I'm going to stand next to you whenever you say this in front of someone else. And then if you're lucky, you get a third person and then a fourth. And then culture has to start from that motivated base until it becomes the truth that other people hear. And it becomes something where they look at the way you're currently doing things and say, I get it. I'm not really happy with that either. I feel as though this other thing makes better sense. It's an unfortunate way to try to do it as a grassroots uprising or a coup, but it's the only way I've seen it happen. Is ideally you would just have someone at a very high level say, I'm not happy with this, and dang it, that satisfies what I'm looking to accomplish, and this is our new mandate. But the reality is that it's usually a group of lower and middle level people saying, no, I mean, we're accountable for moving these things across and for the outcome of this, and here's how I can do that better.
I love it. May, how do you shift the culture?
Is it a culture though? Like it sounds like a habit. And I think the question is, if you have a whole collection of feature requests, it might as well be ideas at this point, right? It's not real. Eventually you'll decide what to pick up and go. And my question is then, where's the strategy in all this, right? It's not about strategy of dealing with the feature requests. It's about strategy of what do we do next? What's the most important thing we could do? And with that strategy lens, then you decide in like under each product manager or whoever is doing the work, decide what you prioritize, right? Like given that lens of I am responsible for, say, UX, right? And our goal is higher retention, whatever it might be. And so how do in this segment, so therefore I need to build the UX that works for this segment. So I can go back into the pile of feature requests and understand what is it that I could do, right? Like there is value in that backlog, but that backlog isn't real until we decide to pull it in. But that choice of when to pull it in is also needs to be informed by strategy. So if you're stuck there, I think it's really important to say, well, what is the strategy? Is there a strategy? And if there's not, that's really the first step to kind of changing the way you see feature requests. Because until that strategy exists and that alignment exists about how do we make decisions, I don't think you can change.
So is the problem of a culture of feature requests really a symptom of a lack of strategy?
Not necessarily.
I mean, that's when you were talking, that made me start thinking about this, because if there is a clear strategy and people understand what we're trying to go to and we're trying to go to, I feel like people, like, you can give them that vision, you can paint that vision, and if people fall in line with that strategy and vision and it cascades down, we can action on it, people get behind the vision and that type of stuff. You might still get feature requests, but I think it's when feature requests are dominating, you become a feature factory, you're dominated by feature requests in a reactive way. It's a symptom of a lack of strategy, maybe. I don't know. Calvin.
If that's the case, then I think May took it in a direction that I hadn't thought of. But if there's a need for strategy, then there's some need for visibility and being able to see what's coming, what is coming down. And I think going back to what DJ said initially, I think there's some value in, maybe some type of tool that allows people to see, to enter information and see what, we're meant to make feature requests, I should say, and to have that visibility across teams, because then you have a kind of a sense of what might be coming. I don't know that necessarily a habit, but think more that it is part of the culture, that either you are visible, you do offer visibility, and you do share in these in these ideas across the organization, or you don't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, submitting feature requests is a habit. I think the underlying, like the lack of accountability, the lack of a shared ownership is cultural. So yeah, just to clarify.
So let's, go back. It is a team sport, right? And so we need to make sure that anybody who's submitting these feels like they're part of the team, understands the goals we're having, our strategy, and recruit them to help us, right, do the best thing for the business. And, I've used scoring prioritization as a way to help at least be transparent about, based on this, where does it rise or fall into the queue of stuff. But I think a lot of it comes down to, without a clear strategy, without some clear understanding of what our core differentiation and advantages are, what our goals are and outcomes are, anybody's strategy can make sense, or anybody's feature request in their mind. The better job we do setting up those barriers, the boundary conditions with the strategy, I think the better we can manage and shift the culture. DJ, you would actually you had said something in our chat here. I wanted to get to it. I probably should have covered it in the first question, what are the best ways to manage feature requests. But let's talk tactically. How do we do this, right? What are the nuts and bolts of intake, and how can we leverage the standardization, centralization, prioritization, feedback loops to help us do what we've been talking about for most of this call? I'll start with you, DJ.
Yeah, I think that my answer in the LinkedIn prompt sort of tackles more of the tactics, the pragmatic steps of it, of standardization. So I think the more you beat the drum of what are the key things that I need when somebody is submitting a feature request, what are we doing? What are through the lens of problem solving? So what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do it now? And what if we don't do it? Those are the three questions that we asked a lot of the time when we were at Fanatics: is why this, why now, and what if we don't do it? And then shaping that prompt again through the lenses of value and problems. Centralization is the next one. So you have myriad ways that feedback and requests can come in, whether it's through customers, whether it's through internal channels. So establishing that centralization in that area where they can land, and that information provided through those prompts is centralized and standardized, usually through like a Jira Epic we would use, or like a shortcut Epic. And then occasionally, it's great in theory. You as a product person carve out time among all the thousands of other things that we're asked to do to sort of refine those. And then there's the feedback loop as well, which is the third component of it, which is where you acknowledge the receipt of that, as Paul was saying, and I think Calvin as well, making folks feel heard, making folks feel valued, because you, again, don't want to establish that reputation of, oh, it's going in the backlog and then it's never heard about again.
Yeah.
But then also I would use, I think this comes back to the conversation that May was bringing up, is strategy, and Grant and Calvin, what you were talking about, prioritization. The feedback loop isn't a one and done. It's not, hey, thank you very much, or let's talk about your idea. It's ongoing. So in my either monthly or biweekly product status calls where we had stakeholders, we would review not only like the challenges and emergencies, but also those P0, those P1, kind of talk through what the roadmap was going to look like and why that was important, but then also carve out opportunities for those folks who provided their ideas to then have, at sort of the end of that meeting, to sort of a mini Shark Tank of, if you think your idea is worthy of fitting in this prioritization scheme that I just explained, then let's talk about it. And so that's sort of those three elements. Again, that's sort of the standardization of the intake, the centralization of the of like, gathering that feedback and prioritizing it, and then establishing those feedback loops.
I love that idea of like turning it into an epic, right? If we leave it in the feature request in that format without switching it to how we're thinking about the stuff we're doing proactively, I feel like you're creating a tool double track system. And, you know, if anything, if we can't create a problem story statement out of it and bring it into an epic, maybe that's one of the answers, right? I can't get there. I also love this idea. I just reread Phoenix Project and Unicorn Project, and the idea of the Innovation Council. One way to do this is to basically create a formal program for how do we bring these things in, have people pitch ideas and that type of stuff.
I mean, I love that in practice or in principle. In practice,
it doesn't work.
It's very difficult.
The Shark Tank comment is what made me think about that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it doesn't have to be anything formal. It's just like, you know, explain to me, like, if it is more valuable than the things we're working on, chances are there's a new development, whether it's a new partnership, a new problem space that we were blind to, a new revenue stream that we weren't aware of, and oftentimes in real time, it's helpful to get that information.
Yeah,
I love it.
But how do we structure this and how do we scale is very much in the realm of product operations, right? And if you as a PM are doing product operations, you're not doing your PM job, right? So I think it's important to kind of always go back to, well, how much time am I spending on building this infrastructure, and am I going to get recognized for this, or am I even going to get punished for this, right? So Jenny Wanger did a workshop earlier this week on ghost product ops, which is you don't really have a product ops function, but people are doing it, and it's like a pretty significant chunk of your product manager's time. And someone actually said, yeah, I got punished for it. I got punished for building infrastructure for my team because I wasn't doing my job as a result of that. So I think it's really important to recognize that, like, a lot of this work requires a lot of working with different stakeholders and sharing in, like, building that infrastructure and agreeing on how to do things. And that takes time because you're talking about so many different teams. You're talking about changing the way they currently work, because right now a handoff requires no conversation, right? So I think it's really important to deeply invest in that. And also, like, just one more thing to kind of talk about, like, when you do build something because someone gave you an idea or someone sent you a feature request, circle back and acknowledge them publicly and say, this idea came from this person and it was really great, and look at the results, and make them feel like they're a part of the process, especially when they're an internal stakeholder.
I love that. I think that's great. But that goes back to that accountability and ownership, right? This is a team thing. We want to bring everybody along. I had something brilliant I was going to say. Oh, actually, what it was 51 minutes. It took May 51 minutes to bring product ops into this one. I thought product ops probably could have come in the first question, May.
I'm trying to be good.
It cut deep too, because she immediately mentioned things that I'm doing instead of my day job.
So you were a ghost product ops person.
We all do it. We all do it. Even if you have a product ops discipline, you still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know if anyone had shared this, was also just the managing expectations. You know, so often as features are, you know, especially, you know, among hippos as they're sharing information and expect that something is going to get done, you know, and making sure we manage upwards, downwards, and across on what the status is, and also with sales, because sales will pre-sell something that is still on the drawing board or kind of in a queue, and
we didn't get into those feature requests that come from RFPs or such like that. We're running to the end. I had one question I was going to ask, and we joked about it when we were in the green room before we started. How do you handle a backlog of thousands of items that has just gotten old, 5 years, thousands of requests? How do you sift through that? How do you do that? quick answers, anybody?
Delete.
Archive, not delete. Archive. Yeah.
Well, I
No,
mean, go ahead, TJ.
No, go ahead, Kevin. Up to you.
You just start to question if it's still needed. It may be that the technology has changed such that you don't need it. It may be that if it's individual customer, that customer is no longer needed. The product may be not around anymore.
Yeah.
So really looking at that on a one-by-one basis to see if it's still needed.
Yeah, I apply kind of an accounting principle of LIFO, last in, first out. So I'll look at the ones that are most recent. When I inherited a product at Return Path, along with a meaty backlog, and so working typically with a lead designer who had a lot of context on the product and the challenges it was facing, along with the principal engineer, to spend a few cycles looking and exploring those most recent. The rest of them I would archive. Wouldn't delete them because you never know, something will come up. An executive submitted an idea and wants to know what's going on, even though it's 9 months later. But that's typically how I would do it, is take it with a grain of salt. Do your due diligence on the last 3 or 6 months worth of ideas. If something's been in the backlog longer than that, chances are it's not relatively high priority.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to some of May's point earlier, right? I would start with, let's make sure we have a clear strategy of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to focus on.
Of course.
Then I'd probably do a mapping exercise to bring them, which ones are relevant to that and which ones are not. And, we can use scoring to be our archive, right? If we look, strategic fit goes down to 1, and, the scoring type stuff, evidence goes down, maybe if we don't have a lot of type of stuff. So, any last thoughts before we go to our wrap up?
So just on the sort of triaging and inherited backlog, similar to features in general, the more you can share the blame and glory, the better. So if you can talk to 2 or 3 well-regarded people on your team and say, hey, here's how I'm looking at handling this. So when someone starts yelling, you have 3 people going, hey, we agreed, rather than like, I don't know what that crazy product person's doing.
Yeah.
But that gives you at least a little bit of extra cover.
You know what I'd love? If I could translate this huge backlog into a visual map by areas of the product that I could eventually touch, but it's structured in a way that I know I'm not going to touch this for another year, but I would love to go back to it later, right? And instead of
then we're opening up that part of the project, see what other requests are there.
Exactly, not just like requests, but ideas, right? This is a collection of ideas with people's names and context and conversations behind it attached to each of these ideas. What if we could go back and look at it when we're ready to look at it? If we know that strategically we're going to focus on this piece, and someone comes to you and talks about that piece, you could file it away under that piece and say, hey, it's not strategically important right now, but like, let's look at it later.
I love the idea of doing mapping into the components of the platform and the product, and as maybe an AI tool
Or
can do
even
something like that.
Parts of the market,
Yeah, I love it. We only got a couple minutes left. Biggest learning or takeaway from this conversation? I'm going to start with Paul.
So I'm going to give DJ my award for things that I've written down today, because I love it when people talk about the relationship between the partnership and transactional. So being able to tie that into feature requests is something that I'm walking away with today.
Awesome. I love it. DJ, you're next.
I love this idea of opening up the process. I think, it echoes what Paul said. I have a sports background and a coaching background, and so I very much look at product and my job through that lens, not only in terms of like managing a team, but building a team, how to develop skills to succeed. And so I think this whole notion of shared responsibility at the end of the day, the buck stops with product, but having a shared ownership in terms of basically building like a sales funnel, but more of like a feature funnel of establishing that and making sure people feel heard, respected, but also accountable for owning their idea.
Love that. Calvin.
The idea of bringing people along on the journey. I think, like Paul, writing things down as we go. But really, getting, opening up the tent and getting more people involved to share that. And just a reminder that different parts of the business have a different insight. I also do want to share, Grant, that every time I have an interaction on a call like this, I end up getting a couple of new books that I need to read. Fortunately, I already have the right thank you. Unicorn Project, I have that in my Amazon list if anyone wants to buy that for me. And I have to add the Jack Stack book on open book management.
Yeah. So well, then one of my, call it a fault or whatever, is I reference my sources a lot. My friend May.
I want to go back to Paul's definitions of what a feature is versus what a capability is. And having that distinction, I feel like would help a lot of people in how they do their day-to-day jobs. And like, this isn't going to change. You're not going to change the culture in a day. Putting in a full-time product ops person's work, you're going to change the culture in maybe 6 months. And when I say change, I mean change, not change, right? It takes time. It's about doing things better.
No, I love that. For me, there's been a couple things. One, tactically, I love DJ's why this, why now, what if we don't do it? I thought that's a great way for the intake. But I think holistically, the conversation on how strategy is important to help us filter this, but more so, just a yes and with everybody else in here, we make this a team sport, right? If feature requests are a two-way thing between product management and somebody else, and there's an adversarial type relationship, we're going to fail. If we make everybody in the company responsible for it and thinking about and helping us build the best product better we can, I think we're in the best place. So what a wonderful conversation. It's so good to see people taking notes. I remember many people tell me how they take notes. I get so much value from this. I don't take notes, but I've never been a note taker. But that's what these conversations do. Great place for us to share our thoughts, gain new perspectives. DJ, Calvin, May, Paul, thank you so much. Next topic, product management tools. Cliff Gilley of Gartner said that he did some research on the ROI of road mapping tools. And so thought it'd be an interesting conversation to have. What tools are people using? What tools do people like? How do we gain the most value from tools? So we'll do that next week on LinkedIn. So look for stuff coming from us. Again, Calvin, DJ, Paul, my friend May, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. We'll see everybody next week. Have a great weekend.
My pleasure. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Grant.